We're going to step off for a while because President Cyril Ramaphosa has just taken to the podium at the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium at Century City Conference Centre in Cape Town. He's addressing the gathering there. Let's listen in.
Being present at this most important occasion, ministers of government in South Africa and deputy ministers, the premiers who are here present, MECs, business leaders who are also here present, sponsors of this wonderful symposium, and delegates and all the distinguished guests who are here, and ladies and gentlemen. Listening to the program director, Mr. Manyathela, MEC Tertius, and Minister Zikalala, you have all, the three of you, just about wrapped up what I need to say. So what do you need me here for? I could just wave and go home. You have, from the program director through to you, MEC Tertius, and you, Minister Zikalala, covered a great deal in terms of what we are here about. And let me thank you once again for Minister Zikalala for making this symposium process so much more engaging and exciting. I heard from the Deputy President yesterday that he was at a dinner. I called him and last night, and he said, I've just come back from a most wonderful dinner with Mr. Zikalala. So you leave me out of these things. So it's wonderful that you make it so engaging and involving, and that the discussions carry on formally and informally. So this indeed just adds to the importance of this whole occasion. It does give me a great pleasure to have this opportunity to speak here, because this is, as I said, a valuable platform to enable all of us to have an introspective look at the opportunities that we all have. And thank you once again, Minister, for giving not only a glowing account and talking about the prospects of investing in infrastructure, but also giving what I would call a SWOT analysis, looking at the strengths that there are, the weaknesses, because there are a number of weaknesses that we need to address, but there are also opportunities, but also talking very honestly and directly about the threats, the risks that prevail, but also coming up with some solutions on how some of these risks can be addressed or mitigated. Investment in infrastructure, as all of us would know, is central to the achievement of our development goals. We are a developing country, and therefore we have identified infrastructure as one of those areas that will, as the minister said, become a flywheel of generating growth in our economy. It is an enormous economic multiplier, and it provides a number of dividends for an economy long after the infrastructure has been built, provided, of course, we do maintain the infrastructure, because there is quite often a tendency or a culture. We set up wonderful infrastructure facilities and don't maintain them thereafter, and they soon and later fall into disrepair. So this symposium is an important part of our effort to close the infrastructure spending gap in our country, because one of the challenges that we face soon after our administration started was the spending gap, the financing gap that existed. And when we initiated this symposia, we were seeking to bring the great minds from government and private sector to participate in finding solutions for, amongst other things, the funding of infrastructure. So if we are able to do that, we will be able to solve a major problem, because it is estimated that to achieve our infrastructure goals, we need almost 4.8 trillion rand to address the challenges that we face as a country. And we need that from both the public sector and from the private sector to a much larger extent. And that is why many of you are here, because the people with the money are here. It reminds me of a judge who kept seeing this person appearing before him in a number of cases, and he was accused of robbing banks. And the judge said to this fellow, he says, "But why do you like robbing banks so much?" And he replied, "Your worship, because that is where the money is." So this is where the money is, and that's why you are here. You are not here to be robbed. You are here to participate in this incredible opportunity of investing in infrastructure alongside government. A number of bold initiatives are being implemented to deliver infrastructure at required scale and at a required pace as well. And we are working as an administration and as a government on the reforms to develop sustainable infrastructure. When we came into office, we found that a great deal of achievements have been made in building infrastructure in our country, but in the course of time, a number of impediments had seeped in, and we needed to implement reforms, and we also needed to give confidence to the private sector and lift business confidence and encourage investment. And this is the journey that we have been on. Now, these reforms include the amendment within our own realm of the Division of Revenue Act to enable, for instance, provincial governments to use their infrastructure grants, which they get from national government, and also their budget allocations, to crowd in the private sector finance for large social infrastructure, but also to open up opportunities for the private sector to participate alongside government in economic infrastructure that will be revenue generating. Now, these programs focus specifically on the social infrastructure with regard to health and education and human settlements, which is housing, as you will have heard, as well as other real economic infrastructure in relation to water, which have a social impact. Among other things, this would enable government to diversify infrastructure financing through innovative solutions. Ever since our administration started, one of the issues I've been raising is, let us find innovative, new, creative solutions of funding infrastructure. And we've now embarked on a number of reforms. The amendment, for instance, to the public-private partnership regulations, which have recently been published, where we would like as many people as possible to comment, are part of the broader reforms to mobilize and pool public and private sector resources for infrastructure. So what we are seeking to do in this symposium should go to a great deal of lengths to contribute to that, is meant to come up with fresh ideas, new ideas, and more implementable ideas of how we can fund infrastructure. What we are doing is to set up the framework, and we now need people with great minds like the ones seated here to be able to help us to operationalize a number of initiatives that we've got in place. For instance, we set up the infrastructure fund, and since we've done so, we have seen a steady growth in the portfolio of blended finance projects that use relatively small fiscal allocations to de-risk public infrastructure projects and raise finance in debt capital markets. One of the areas we have not really been mining and exploiting greatly is the debt capital markets, and to find a much more practical and beneficial, mutually beneficial way in which all these can function. Through the work that has been done in transforming the infrastructure landscape in our country, the total value of our country's strategic integrated projects has grown from about 340 billion rand in July of 2020 to 540 billion rand now. Now, 18 projects valued at a number of billions of rands have been completed, covering areas that are important, such as human settlements, housing that is, and in housing we're looking at social housing as well, which is a very important area, and a number of the three speakers who spoke about that. The road infrastructure in our country, water infrastructure as well. As a water scarce country, it has been important for us to focus on water infrastructure. One of the things that one can speak so well about what we have done in this current administration is to have a much better understanding of the water infrastructure in our country as a whole, how every river flows, how every dam is able to store water, and the more other projects that are needed to be implemented to increase the water availability in our country. Now, the value of projects currently in construction in these areas is quite massive. It has grown from a minuscule amount of money to about 230 billion rand. Now, projects worth nearly 170 billion are currently in procurement, where we have now moved beyond conceptualization to now procuring and getting the construction industry to bid for those projects. It is significant that blended finance projects which leverage private sector financing are also growing steadily. Now, this had tapered down over the years, and we're now seeing a great deal of interest. And this also shows the confidence that the private sector, notwithstanding what the doomsayers say about the investability of South Africa, because they often talk about doomsday and say that things are falling apart. But when you look at the book, the real investment book, and the projects that are underway, you actually see a great deal of interest and confidence that is being invested in the country. In this calendar, 11 projects with a total investment value of 45 billion are expected to reach financial close. Now, reaching financial close has been one of those challenges, as all of you would know, because it's very easy to conceptualize a project and say we want to build the biggest dam in the world, but it is the crunch of closing the project financially that matters most. One of the areas that we have focused on is the unblocking of multiple government authorization permits, licenses, and exemptions. Now, this has been a recurring challenge, which we have focused on our reform journey. We realized that there were blockages, there were delays, and there were a whole number of horrible things that were happening. And I've often said that, for instance, it would take people or companies and people 3 years just to get a water license, just a mere water license to be able to develop the country economically. And now we have reduced that. Getting permits, we're cleaning all the cobwebs to enable the permit granting system to work in tandem with our economic goals and ambitions. Now, to date, Infrastructure South Africa has unblocked a total of 25 billion worth of projects in the renewable energy space using the Infrastructure Development Act to fast-track government authorizations. And there's much more work that needs to be done. But the important thing is that our reforms are beginning to bear fruit. Our reforms are unblocking and unlocking a great deal of investment. And this is where I would say the tire hits the tar, because this is what matters most. Now, among the strategic integrated projects, the energy portfolio has the biggest project pipeline, largely because of the energy challenges that we are facing, but also because we've had to build more energy assets. For instance, our transmission lines. Coming from an apartheid governed country, which restricted energy availability to just a few people who lived in this country, largely white people. This government has, and the previous government administrations, have made it their task to extend access to electricity, and that has given rise to a need to broaden the assets or the facilities in regard to transmission. And now, as our energy availability is under pressure, we've had to rely on renewable energy processes, which we are now doing, and also on green energy. Now, the project pipeline comprises more than 100 projects amounting to 240 billion just in the energy space. And our country is positioning itself to be a leader in green energy, working towards a sustainable future driven by innovation. And we see this green energy or clean energy beginning to bring about new industries that are driven by technology and innovation, a space that we are driving our country into. The green energy program, estimated at 300 billion and comprised of the 14 projects, is an important part of our country's just transition. Now, major water infrastructure projects are also underway. As I said, water is a major challenge in our country's architecture, and the projects that are under construction in several parts of the country are expanding our capacity with regard to water availability in our country in relation to dams and bulk water infrastructure as well. The other area which Minister Zikalala also spoke about is in the transport sector. And this is one of our best performing portfolios in our strategic integrated project pipeline, with 6 projects worth 25 billion rand completed to date, and a further 5 projects that are currently under construction. And he also mentioned these wonderful bridges that are going to be some of the best on our continent. Now, human settlements The accommodation of our people is another important area, and to date, we've created 38,000 direct jobs, as you heard, and a number of housing units that are now under construction. And this is being done under a very good foundation that we have built over the past 30 years. Over the past 30 years, this government has ensured that 4.7 million households get housing. And this is an incredible feat, better than none that I can think of, because this clearly shows in a very direct and physical way that this is a government that is focused on improving the lives of its people. To build 4.7 million houses for our people is actually a great achievement. Now, the key to developing a bankable and viable project pipeline is what all of you would know is project preparation. As I said, you can conceptualize a project, but it is the preparatory portion or part that plays a key role. Now, projects being taken to procurement without the requisite readiness often lead to cost and time overruns during implementation, because it is very tempting to conceptualize a program, or a project rather, and want to rush to procurement. And without due and careful preparation, many of these often run into time overruns, as well as a great deal of money being overspent. We have made bold and decisive interventions to provide a predictable way in which preparation can be done, including the funding regime for project preparation, and to consolidate expertise in developing bankable projects through our own infrastructure development agency, Infrastructure South Africa. Now, for the longest time, many in our country kept complaining that we are not seeing the cranes, we're not seeing the yellow equipment all over the country. And without saying this was deliberate, it was important to prepare properly for each project so that when the projects commence, we're then able to have them functioning extremely well. Minister Zikalala has also referred to the criminal element that also seeped into projects, where you had the construction mafia coming in and overtaking and hijacking projects or stopping them. Now, the process we've been involved in is to actually do the proper preparation, from bringing in, for instance, a specialized police unit that is dealing with this matter, but at the same time, to also deal with the other community aspect, which has often been disregarded whenever projects are embarked upon. For projects often happen where people live. They don't happen in space. And unless those who are involved in projects pay due attention to what happens in a community and how a project will be received and seen in the community, we are doomed to fail. And this process and this time that we've gone through, as Minister Zikalala was saying, has been involved in ensuring that there will be proper facilitation so that we have a good framework, a good method in which to pay attention to serious matters like this. Now, Infrastructure South Africa is reorienting project preparation to promote growth and enable a number of other great dividends that can flow from this. For instance, the manufacturing, green economy, and involving small and medium enterprise businesses in the area to be part of the projects that are embarked upon. because that in many ways is the insurance policy that gives us the greater chance of success of our projects. Now, what I'm saying is not unique to South Africa. I've heard that it happens in many other countries because communities around the world want to be involved in anything that is meant to benefit them. And they are correctly saying nothing about us without us. And therefore we need to involve communities and be very careful in ensuring that it happens. Years ago, I met a person who's involved in the built environment who embarked on a most wonderful project that finally won the best project in the world with Habitat, the UN agency Habitat. And I said, what was the real thing that made you succeed with this project? He said, it was spending a great deal of time consulting with people who were affected. And he said, we held 1,500 meetings. And he studiously went through all those meetings. And he said, once that had happened, our project was a flyer. It was embraced by everyone, and everyone wanted to be a part of it. And that is why the United Nations agency also recognized this. So Invest South Africa has really come to a wonderful conclusion of saying that we do need proper project preparation. And we can never think that we are wasting time, effort, and energy. Project preparation from a technical point of view, from a finance point of view, from a community point of view, and getting rid of all the risks and attending to all the threats that could stop the project or delay it. Now, it is focusing on projects that contribute to job creation, both during construction and during the operations as well. It is promoting economic competitiveness through projects that help integrate South Africa also into the global supply chain, particularly focusing on some of the facilities that we have. Infrastructure South Africa is also preparing projects in a manner that contributes to inclusivity by broadening the participation of local content. This is another important area that our administration is focusing on, that we need more and more local content. And local content, the bringing in of locally made, if you like, implements that have to do with projects, leads to economic growth, to job creation, and it is through this that we are able to also bring in a great deal of dynamism in the building of projects, because we should now know that the implements that go into building up these projects can be found locally, and we can promote the growth and the establishment of a number of industries. This approach is being applied to what we've identified as the 12 priority infrastructure projects with a cumulative project value of more than 180 billion rand. It is anticipated that more than 400,000 jobs, both direct and indirect, would be created during construction and operation of projects if we are able to utilize all this type of wisdom that we've come about. And that is something that is really applauded and commendable in the way that we are now approaching infrastructure. If there's anything that you could applaud, even if you're lazy this morning, this is what it is. Now, the top 12 priority infrastructure projects are aimed at leveraging technical and financial expertise of development finance institutions and multilateral development banks to increase the capacity of the state. Now, I'm really pleased that there are quite a number of delegates here who come from those institutions. Now, we have a number of those priority projects, and they are spread throughout the country. As Minister Zikalala was also saying, we're not focusing on certain parts of the country only. Our country, with its 9 provinces, has a number of infrastructure needs. And at the national level, as we look at all these projects and plan for them, we look at developing the country as a whole and not just one. So the priority projects include in Limpopo, Fetaho Mutubatsi, in the Northern Cape, in KZN, as well the special economic zones that we are putting up. All those are aimed for project preparation and support at this time. 4 of the top priority projects support the planned investment also in rail and ports to alleviate the freight congestion, to shift transportation of goods from roads to rail, and to boost exports through improved access. Now, one of the challenges that we've been facing, and this has been building up over a number of years, and hence the reforms that we have embarked upon, is in our logistics area, our rail and the ports, and gladly we have brought the private sector, including labor, to be part of this whole process, and we've now got a roadmap on how to address the weakness that has seeped into a very important artery of our economy, which is logistics. There are priority projects for project preparation in energy security and the green economy, such as the Eskom's gas project, as well as the pumped hydro storage projects in Limpopo and specialized economic zones. Now, water infrastructure projects have traditionally been financed largely through the fiscus. Now, through the preparations that are going on with regard to a number of water projects, the bulk supply we are bringing in the private sector, and Infrastructure South Africa is aiming to leverage the private sector involvement in financing and delivery of a number of these projects. Now, health and education projects are also very important, and they are included in the 12th the priority projects. And they are aimed at also addressing the funding challenge and gap that I was talking about earlier. And with this, we're then able to enhance the integrated planning and proper procurement processes that are important in this. And we are working to rebuild the construction industry and ensure that it is able to deliver projects on time and within budget, and also to the right quality. The construction industry has been facing enormous challenges, but it is also an industry that has also seen a great deal of transformation. Construction industry in our country was largely the terrain of the previously advantaged people in our country. And now a number of those who were previously disadvantaged have come into the construction industry, and they are playing a very important role. But there was a time when things dipped down, and we are now very actively, as government, playing a role in bolstering the construction industry, including addressing all these challenges of the construction stoppages that I was talking about. With well over 1.2 million people employed in the industry, there needs to be a constant, reliable pipeline of projects that enables the sector and its supply industry to plan ahead. Because as we know, construction projects require a lot of planning and preparation. Infrastructure South Africa is today publishing, as you've already heard, from both the program director, who is so well informed, as well as the minister, about the construction book that they have both been talking and boasting about, which is wonderful. So that showcases number of infrastructure projects. And that just shows the depth of organization, the depth of detailing exactly infrastructure importance in our country. And as you will see with the construction book, it actually tells a very good story about where we are as a country and what we've done and where we want to go to. And the book includes a number of other projects where the state-owned enterprises also participate in. Now, the projects showcased in the book will contribute to greater economic growth. And of course, this will happen with the participation of the private sector. And this is where the partnership between the public sector and the private sector is solidified in a very visible way, where we both can see, touch, feel the projects that are set out in the construction book. And the book is a first of its kind in South Africa, and it demonstrates our government's ambition to drive economic development through the construction sector and deliver high-quality infrastructure projects that create value in the economy and society. More than anything else, this book, as I say, is demonstrable evidence. It answers the question of those doomsayers and those who've been very doubtful about our focus on infrastructure. And out of this, and as you read this construction book, you should start seeing the cranes going up, the yellow equipment flying around. And if you are as imaginative, now, if you are as imaginative as you were when you were young, when you longed to play with those toys,
it seems we've Once again, apologies. It seems we've lost our audio connection to President Cyril Ramaphosa there, who I think was sort of leading up to the tail end of his opening address at the Infrastructure Symposium currently sitting in Cape Town. He's touched on a whole host of issues, including the fact that 4.8 trillion rand is what he reckons is needed to address the infrastructure challenges that we have in this country. And he reckons that money is going to come from the men and women seated in that very room, who of course comprise of both private and public sector players. He says that a lot of work, though, is being done to ensure that a whole lot of these projects are expedited, including regulations or amendments that have been made to the public-private partnership regulations in an effort to ensure that funding is in fact garnered in a much quicker way than it certainly has over the past couple of years. 25 billion rands worth of projects have been unlocked. He says this could see more than 400 direct and indirect jobs being created. The president also taking time to pat himself on the back there, saying that since the dawn of democracy, South Africa has been able to build 4.7 million houses, or rather, yes, 4.7 million houses for a number of households throughout the rest of the country, almost demanding an applause for that. Let's continue listening into what else the president has to say.
Other regions of the world, sub-Saharan Africa has the longest export times, the highest export costs, and onerous border compliance requirements. And this is given rise to by the lack of logistics infrastructure that we do need to gear up to higher levels. Now, transport costs also in our own SADC region are among the highest in the world, with border posts imposing significant costs and time delays. And this is another area that needs to be addressed so that the development of our economies can be at a higher level. We therefore welcome the inaugural Leaders Forum meeting convened by the Minister yesterday. And And that is why we are so grateful to have a number of ministers from other parts of our continent. We hope that it will bring fresh momentum and impetus to regional and continent-wide projects, and also help to institutionalize platforms of engagement and lead to a sharing of resources, of knowledge for project preparation, execution, finance, and private sector participation. We must be resolute as we work to progress the projects that we've identified from financial close to implementation. And we must continue our efforts to create the right environment to develop better infrastructure. Much of this I spoke about earlier, as well as on the issue of involving everyone. And we must improve the delivery of the catalytic infrastructure projects that connect our countries and our regions. Now, with the advent of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we are going to rely on more efficient infrastructure, roads, ports, as well as air, in terms of being able to transport the goods that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is beckoning on us to embark on. Since it was first held in 2020, the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium has been in many ways an essential part of the growth and infrastructure investment in our country. It has contributed a great deal, so you are participating in a platform that has really generated not only interest, but also has generated a great deal of focus when it comes to infrastructure. Now, as we reflect on the great progress that has been made, and there has been great progress, we look ahead to even better prospects for growth and development in our economy, utilizing infrastructure, as I often say, as the flywheel that is going to drive the economic growth that we need. We have done much over the last few years, and through this symposium, we are, in my view, continuing to strengthen the foundation to do much more. So I commend you for being here, and I want to thank you for participating once again in this symposium, because it is an important intervention that you are making. So bring your wisdom, bring the best of your creative ideas, so that we can together work to develop our country. If you are in the private sector, this is where you can make money. If you are in the public sector, this is where you can foster development. If you're an academic participating here, this is where you can showcase your intellectual prowess. So everybody has an opportunity to shine. So come and put your ideas forward. We thank you for being here. Thank you very much.
All right, and that rounds off President Cyril Ramaphosa's marathon address, dare I say, at the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium, which is currently being held at Century City Conference Centre in Cape Town. His final remarks there that everybody has a stake in this, everybody stands something to benefit, presumably, of course, if they participate meaningfully in this particular infrastructure symposium. It's an important gathering, especially when you consider just how much has gone wrong when it comes to our infrastructure development. I mean, one just has to think about the many ways in which this issue has made its way into the news when it comes to the construction mafia, people apparently having to abdicate their projects because they're being threatened by the criminal underworld. And so we'll certainly keep a close eye on the gathering, get you a sense of what else is being said over the next 3 days.